Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today, I want to talk about how to lead with less ego, more humility, so that you can lead your team to success. I believe that humility is such a key factor in effective teamwork, but it's often neglected. A lot of us are thinking like we have to lead, we have to get things done, we have to move it forward, we have to achieve goals. And we might not think of the impact that being a humble leader really can have on your team and on the company. That being said, for us leaders, promoting humility within our teams and ourselves is not just about being humble or modest. It's really about creating that base for a stronger, more resilient, more adaptive team. So that's what we're going to talk about this week and Reflect Forward. We're going to talk about the transformative power of humility and how it can dramatically enhance team dynamics, improve performance, and foster innovation. Hey, who knew that humility was such a thing? I also talk about why humility is such an essential tool for you as a leader and offer practical tips on how to integrate this virtue into your everyday leadership. So let's hop in. So, the first thing I want to address is confidence versus humility. I have heard this misconception that humility and confidence are mutually exclusive, and that is not true. The most effective leaders absolutely know that true confidence comes from being secure enough to recognize your strengths and weaknesses, to admit your mistakes. These type of leaders maintain their self-assurance while also being humble enough to realize that they don't have all the answers. Because let's face it, as leaders, we don't have all the answers. And this balance really encourages a more inclusive culture and team environment where every member feels valued and empowered to contribute, driving the collective success of the company forward without diminishing your decisiveness and assertiveness and your authenticity as leaders. And so I wanted to address that perhaps elephant in the room because I think that a lot of people really do attribute humility to modesty. And that's not true. I am definitely not a modest person. I put myself out there. I try to share ideas. I am assertive, but 100% I lead with humility. I know I don't have all the answers and I am willing to say it. I admit when I make mistakes. I actively seek feedback. And that's how you build trust. You be transparent about who you are, where your shortcomings are, and you still can have confidence to really step up as a leader and assert yourself and to make those tough decisions that we leaders all need to make. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, balancing confidence with humility. Yes, we can be overconfident, and that's where we step into letting our ego drive us. But 100%, we do not have to diminish our self-confidence just to be able to show that we're humble. Humble leaders understand that they have strengths and weaknesses and are willing to admit their mistakes, are willing to ask questions, they're willing to change their mind. That is what that balance looks like. So now let's jump into why humility really matters for leaders. According to a Harvard Business Review report, teams led by individuals who exhibited humility, who were perceived as being humble leaders, experience a 55% increase in performance compared to those organizations led by less humble leaders. So it matters. A 55% increase in performance, well, that's because people feel engaged and empowered and they like where they work. People who don't feel those things and hate where they work tend to not be engaged in what they do and tend to not be as productive. So humility matters. It absolutely sets the tone for your organization. Why? Because humble leaders promote a culture of learning when they acknowledge that they don't have all the answers. And when you admit that you don't have all the answers, it encourages your team to speak up, to contribute their ideas, their expertise, their knowledge. And this helps innovation thrive. I do this all the time at Stonehenge. I'm not sure how to handle this. What would you do? And I get really innovative, great responses. It shows that I care, that I don't have to have all the answers, that I'm humble enough to say, I'm not sure how we should do this. What do you think? And people really appreciate it. So asking those questions, admitting that you don't have all the answers absolutely enhances team collaboration and it creates that culture of trust and openness. Humble leaders also recognize and develop their talent. And this is really important. We need to be able to attract and retain talent. And people who work for those with big egos who only care about themselves tend to not feel like they are getting the personal and professional development that they seek in the workplace. So a humble leader who recognizes my team is so amazing and I want to make sure that I'm helping them be as successful as possible and I'm going to do everything I can to develop them, absolutely is going to retain those team members more. In fact, a study by Forbes recently showed that companies led by humble people report a 20% higher rate of employee satisfaction and a 30% stronger willingness among employees to take on big, important performance challenges. So this is really important. When you lead with humility, you create that safe space, you help people flourish, you are focused on developing other people and really being that servant leader. And lastly, humble leaders are more likely to ask for, to actively seek feedback and actually hear it. They adapt their strategies based on what's most effective rather than being so rigidly tied to their original ideas. I think that this is really important. You know how I'm a believer in feedback. If you want to be a great leader, you got to seek feedback and you got to take action with it. You've got to admit when you're wrong. You've got to be willing to pivot when you get this kind of feedback. That shows that you are leading with humility. All right, so now let's jump into the challenges to humility in leadership. Because despite its significant benefits, humility is often a rare commodity in today's business place. I mean, let's face it, we see these types of leaders that lead with ego all around us, and oftentimes they're celebrated. We associate leadership with strong, assertive, decisive characteristics, which translates in this perception that leaders have to be in control all the time or infallible, and they can never show weaknesses. So when leaders feel like they can never show weaknesses, they are not willing to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I made a mistake, and really practice humility through vulnerability. There's also this widespread misconception that humility undermines or authority or credibility within a leader, which I completely believe is the opposite. Right? People want to connect with real people. I also think insecurity is a big part of this. Oftentimes people will project when they are feeling very insecure about something. They can't let people know, right? Imposter syndrome is 100% a real thing where people feel like, don't deserve to be here. I'm not good enough for this job or this leadership role. And so they overcompensate those insecurities by being authoritative or decisive or not listening to others. And they protect themselves by not accepting feedback and feeling like they have to have all of the answers. So insecurity plays a big part in this. In fact, I think insecurity actually is probably a thread that goes through all of these. I think when we are not feeling secure with ourselves, we want to make people like us, or we want to make these tough decisions, or we want to come across as tough. And really, it's insecurity with ourselves and within our relationships with other people that drive a lot of these behaviors. And finally, self-awareness. I think a lot of leaders who lead with their egos, who don't show humility, are simply just not aware and they don't seek feedback, so they don't understand how their behaviors are actually hindering success. I'm reading the Elon Musk biography, and it's so fascinating to see this incredibly brilliant human being even drive some of the most important things that we're working on in society, but he has no self-awareness on how his actions impact people. Or maybe he just doesn't care. But that self-awareness piece is really, really important. If you want to show up with humility, you have to be aware when maybe your ego is driving you. So understanding yourself helps you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, helps you understand your impact on other people. And when you understand those things, then you can show up with more humility to say, hey, I don't always handle this the right way, or I don't really know how to do this. Will you help me? That is humble leadership at its very best. Oh, and then there's one other thing that I wanted to mention about why humility is such a tough leadership trait. A lot of times, the reward system within an organization drives people to focus on those personal accolades, on climbing the corporate ladder, on doing whatever it takes to help them advance without thinking about the impact for the rest of the team or the importance of lifting the entire team. So I think that's another thing to really look at. If you have leaders who do not exhibit humility within your organization, that's a good place to look. Does the reward system, do people get paid bonuses based on individual achievements and outcomes versus collaborative efforts and support? So that's a really important thing. If you want a team-oriented culture within your company and you have performance reviews and compensate based on individual accomplishments, then you're probably going to see a gap in humility, what you need to really build a successful team versus what the leader is really doing to make sure he or she is growing. Let's dive into how you implement this. So if you are a leader who is looking to incorporate more humility into your leadership style, here are some practical tips to consider. This is where I would get started. This is where I did get started. So the first is to encourage open communication. You have to foster an environment where feedback is freely exchanged, where you talk about issues, where anybody feels safe to be able to share an idea or to speak up. And you can achieve this in team meetings or one-on-one sessions where both positive feedback and constructive criticism are welcome on both parties. So that open communication really matters. What does that mean? It means you need to sit down and you need to talk to people. You need to get to know people. You need to create that psychological safety. You need to build that trust. And you cannot do that unless you encourage that open communication. I think leaders who lead with their ego, they want to shut that down. They don't care. They don't want to hear about it. And that simply is not going to build team success. The second thing is to acknowledge contributions. Make it a habit to recognize and appreciate what your team members do for you, for the team, for the company. Public acknowledgement absolutely can boost morale and it motivates others to contribute to their efforts too. But make sure that you understand if a person wants public recognition. There are some people who hate that. They feel really embarrassed and would prefer just a private thank you or pat on the back. So make sure that you understand your team, but absolutely, whether it's privately or publicly, you have to acknowledge contributions. We all feel like we belong when we know that we're making a positive contribution to our teammates, to the people who are most important in our lives. So share that. Let people know. That really mattered. You did a great job here. This is how your efforts really helped me or helped the team. It's the number one thing that you can do to show that you are humble, that you see other people, and it really fosters that team environment, which creates more success. The next thing is to lead by example. You have to lead by example. When you make a mistake, embrace it, speak up, learn from it, show people that you are not too good to admit that you made a mistake or that your ego won't let you handle it, that you have to deflect or blame. Just own it. When leaders handle their errors with grace and accountability, it sets a powerful example for the team. It makes other people more willing to say, hey, I made a mistake too, or I could have done this better. And that is humility. So if you want to foster the humility within your team, you've got to be able to lead by example and step up and speak up and own it when maybe your performance could have been better too. And then finally, you need to support personal and professional development. People want to grow. When you invest in training and development, when you invest in training and development programs for your employee, they know that you care about them. And that's really important to exhibit humility in leadership. People want to know that you care about them, that you don't just care about yourself. Let's face it, we all care about ourselves, but humble leaders say, your success really matters to me, and I'm going to invest in you. When you support your team's growth and development, it absolutely tells them, I value your contributions and I am committed to your success. And that is humble leadership at its best. By fostering humility within yourself and within your team, you enhance the effectiveness of everyone and you contribute to a more ethical, more sustainable, a more engaged team where people like coming to work, when they enjoy working for you as a leader, and when they know that they have the opportunities to be their best because their leaders invest in them. That is the power of being a humble leader. So you can see none of that has anything to do with not having self-confidence. It has everything to do with being self-confident, to really be vulnerable and open and to take feedback and learn and grow from it. That's what people want. Humble leaders are real people and people want to work for real people. So hopefully that inspires you to consider humility as a highly effective, important leadership trait that will help improve your success and your team's success. And hopefully you walked away with some practical tips. With that, I will leave you to your day. I hope you have a great one. If you like this podcast, please write a review, share it with a friend, go on and subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. And if you like tips like this that I gave today, please check out my book, The Ownership Mindset, a handbook for transforming your life and leadership. You can find it at Amazon, or you can ping me and I'll get you a coupon to be able to get a 20% discount on a signed book. All right, with that, I'll leave you for your week. We'll see you next week. Thanks.